If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 81, Flashback Finalizing the Plan. Bones Manor. November 1994. Harry Potter, Amelia Bones and Sinus Greengrass engaged themselves in the discussion of the terms of treaty for the Alliance during the next hour. They have had a proper text for the terms used for the Great Alliance. They used those terms as the base and only made some minor changes to suit the requirement of the current time. The terms of the treaty which they arrived had the following outlining principles. No member of the Alliance will intentionally try to harm any other member of the Alliance. All members of the Alliance will try to maintain harmonious relation and cooperation regarding economic and political outlook. No member will willingly damage other members' economic or political interest. In a case one member is dragged into state of war or is unreasonably attacked, all the other member would have to take the initiative to help the said member. All members would try to solve all kinds of differences in the Alliance meeting with consensus. It should be kept a priority to keep a united front for the outside world. The Potter family head will act as the custodian of the Alliance and will be ex officio chairman of all meetings held by the Alliance. The Potter family will bear all the expenses required for the functioning of the Alliance. Any new member in the Alliance would only be added after a consensus among the existing members. Any member is free to leave the Alliance any time they wish. They would be bound on their magic and life to keep the information about the Alliance secret. 4 meetings of the Alliance must be every year. Each member would be magically bound to attend at 2 of these meetings. With the terms of the Alliance set in motion and documented on the costly parchment in detail was all set to be signed. Harry Potter was the first. He raised his holly wand. I, Harry James Potter, as Lord Potter, Lord Black, Lord Gryffindor, Lord Slytherin, and Lord Peverell, take oath on magic and life to follow the terms of the Alliance with complete devotion. I hereby announce myself to be part of the Great Alliance. Amelia Bones followed the suit. I, Amelia Bones, as Magical Regent of Lord Apparent Bones, Susan Bones, take oath on magic and life to follow the terms of the Alliance with complete devotion. I hereby announce myself to be part of the Great Alliance. Sinus was the last. I, Sinus Greengrass, as Lord Greengrass, take oath on magic and life to follow the terms of the Alliance with complete devotion. I hereby announce myself to be part of the Great Alliance. White flashed around the 3 and they could feel the terms of alliance setting on them. A moment of silence ensued in the Bones Manor's hall, which was broken by Amelia. Now tell us, what is your plan about the Triwizard Tournament? Well, I am going to bring down Dumbledore, declared Harry. Both Amelia and Sinus were taken aback by the sudden declaration. From their birth they had seen Dumbledore sitting as unrivaled emperor of the wizarding world, holding the enormous influence he wielded. Even when Voldemort was at his prime, he could not shake the massive throne on which Dumbledore sat. How? Stammered Amelia. Harry smiled and went into a detailed narration of his plans. It took him some time to describe all what he had in his mind. It took him few minutes to go through all of it. After he completed his description of his plan, Sinus and Amelia remained silent for some time. Are you sure? Do you think this will work? After all, it's Dumbledore, said Sinus with a lot of doubt on his face. Harry chuckled. This is the notion I want to end. Invincibility of Dumbledore. He must suffer a defeat. Even if it is a minor defeat, he must suffer it in his face. He continued, you know, if I want, I could literally tear apart Hogwarts ward from Dumbledore and remove him as the headmaster. But if I do so, only my image will be tarnished. Even though Dumbledore will lose some political influence, his reputation would only be solidified. With his subtle manipulation he would paint me as the villain. Combined with all what had transpired in recent past, to prove as the new Dark Lord would be a child's play for him. I could also have simply taken a magical oath and most of the students would have been convinced of my innocence, stated Harry. But it would have achieved nothing. The same story would have continued. Dumbledore would have remained the same and would have tried to pull another stunt. He must face some consequences. Both Sinus and Amelia nodded in understanding. After the detailed explanation Harry went through, they were also tempted to launch an attack on Dumbledore. With my action, I am hoping to set a chain reaction. To achieve what I stated, we must bring a change in the Wizarding Society. Hopefully, my actions would kickstart everything and change the perception of the Wizarding Society towards how they view things, concluded Harry. A moment of silence ensued after Harry finished speaking. What about the Longbottom family? Asked Sinus abruptly. I will talk with Madame Longbottom and try to convince her, said Harry after a moment of thought. Though I have only read good things about her in the memoirs of many parents and grandparents, I don't know how much she has changed since then. Amelia also nodded. it is also true. In the past 14 years, especially before Neville Longbottom went to Hogwarts, she had hardly made a public appearance. Sinus also nodded in agreement. Other than the compulsory attendance required in the Wizengamot, she has not attended any single meeting. For the past 11 years the Longbottom family have not exercised their voting even for once. Chapter 82, Amelia arrives in Hogwarts. When Harry Potter finally came out of his reverie of the flashback, the entire Great Hall was already in chaos. Students were arguing loudly among themselves. Harry Potter was the center of attention with hundreds of eyes focused on him. Harry could literally feel the intense heated gaze coming towards him from the Gryffindor table. Opposite to the atmosphere at the Gryffindor table, the students at Slytherin table seemed in joy. Though their arguments were as intense as the other houses, their faces were bright with smiles all over it. Dumbledore had calmed down his emotions and he got up and turned towards Minerva. Minerva, I am going to my office. Will you please summon Mr. Potter to my office? Though Minerva felt uneasy about the whole situation, she nonetheless nodded in agreement. Dumbledore had not even taken few steps when the gates of the Great Hall were opened with a loud bang. The loud sound instantly quietened all the entire students. Harry smirked slightly knowing what was about to happen next. Under the gazes of the entire Hogwarts, 4 people walked inside the Great Hall. Leading them up front was a red-haired witch, DMLE head, Madame Amelia Bones. Behind her were 3 Aurors. The same trio which had followed Madame Bones during her previous visit. Head Auror Rufus Scrimgeour, Kingsley Shacklebolt and Nymphadora Tonks. Dumbledore stayed rooted at his place and his expression turned unsightly. Amelia Bones was one such hardened character that Dumbledore did not want to deal with. He was also worried the more she will get involved the more she would get closer to Harry. He did not wish to see Great Alliance revamped in any form. The entire Hogwarts stared at Madame Bones in anticipation. She marched through the center of the Great Hall between the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff table to the teacher's table. She stood directly opposite to Dumbledore who was now facing her. Headmaster Dumbledore, I believe you must have received the letter or I should say the notice for the impeding hearing in the Wizengamot that is to be held the day after tomorrow, said Amelia in crisp voice with a steely gaze fixed on Dumbledore. Though unwilling to hold any kind of conversation with Amelia, Dumbledore nodded his head stiffly. Good, said Amelia with her voice getting a bit soft. With respect to the trial, I am here to conduct investigation. And since you are one of the 3 named suspects, I would want to ask some questions regarding the charges, said Amelia. Dumbledore sighed with a hurt expression appearing on his face. He appeared as if he had aged decades in the moment and his wide shoulders slumped downwards like a broken man. I don't understand what Harry's motives are. I have always wanted his well-being. But if this is what he wishes, I would definitely be willing to cooperate with you, Amelia. We can hold the discussion in my office, he added further. Amelia paid no heed Dumbledore's acting and her voice toughened. Headmaster Dumbledore, firstly, it is Madame Bones for you. Secondly, I am not here to hold discussion with you, said Madame Bones in her steely voice and blazing eyes. If there is word you want to use, what I am here to do is would be interrogation about the charges pressed against you. And finally, I am here not to make your or myself comfortable that you need to invite me in the office. You are not the only person I would be asking questions, declared Madame Bones. Amelia Bones turned and faced the student body in the Great Hall. They had clearly heard all what she declared. The Muggle-born or the Muggle-raised who had no idea of the outer wizarding world other than Hogwarts were clearly astonished. They had seen Madame Bones previously when she had arrested Snape, but that time, she had maintained the decorum with Dumbledore. But this time, she had clearly cut across everything what Dumbledore spoke. For students like Hermione, the headmaster Dumbledore was like a deity. And to see someone riding over Dumbledore in such a manner was not something they could have ever imagined. Pure-blood students and half-blood raised in Wizarding World were clearly not surprised. They knew very well the fiery temper of Amelia Bones. And she definitely had the magical capabilities to back her temper. Even people like Lucius Malfoy avoided her as far as he could. Facing all the students, Amelia said, "Students, Hogwarts won't be holding any classes today." The moment she finished her sentence, the student body erupted in noise. No one knew whether they were cheering or protesting. Even Dumbledore moved forward and walked across the teacher's table to arrive in front of it. Amelia raised her wand and with a loud boom from it, the entire Great Hall again quietened. My Aurors will ask some simple questions from you all. After which you would be free to leave the Great Hall and return to your dorms. Till that time no one leaves the hall. No one has to worry for anything. You will only be asked simple questions. Just answer them truthfully, added Amelia further. Dumbledore, who had reached next to Amelia, said at the moment, I don't think you can suspend the classes, Amelia. I would not allow it. You cannot act as you wish. Also, you cannot interrogate students, said Dumbledore with finality in his tone. Amelia stared at the old coot, and even Harry could not wait for Amelia to put down Dumbledore one notch further down. Chapter 83, The Game Begins. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The aura around Amelia thickened and the atmosphere in the Great Hall became even more tense. Beneath the teacher's table, students watched in complete anticipation the drama which was about to unfold. One last time, I will remind you, Headmaster, boomed Amelia's voice laced with enough fury. The students nearest the teacher's table took one step back subconsciously. Amelia's eyes blazed with fury. It is Madam Bones for you. Don't cross boundaries. If it happens again, don't blame me for being rude. And don't teach me how to do my work, Headmaster. This is a school under the governing jurisdiction of Ministry of Magic. You would do well to remember that Hogwarts is not some kind of sovereign nation. It is as accountable and responsible to the Ministry of Magic as any other institution is, bellowed Amelia. And I am here to do investigation into how the name of a minor child appeared out nowhere from a powerful magical artifact when it was supposed to give only 3 names. Interestingly, it is the same child who have had around a dozen life-threatening encounters in 3 years at Hogwarts, boomed Amelia. Her voice turned heavy and chilly, don't interfere in my work. She waited for no response and turned towards Head Aura Rufus Scrimgeour, Kingsley Shacklebolt and Nymphadora Tonks and instructed, record the statements of every student. Move. Dumbledore raised his hands as if to stop them and to eye something, but seeing the darkening expression on face of Amelia Bones and her eyes seething with fury, he decided against it. He let out a deep sigh accepting his small defeat. The 3 Aurors reacted as if they came out of a reverie and hurriedly walked towards the students. Rufus Scrimgeour walked towards the Slytherin table while Kingsley Shacklebolt and Tonks towards the Gryffindor table. Rufus waved his wand and a table and chair was summoned near the wall. He took his seat on the chair near the wall. Let us start with Ravenclaw, said Rufus. One by one each of you starting from the front will come here and answer the questions. After that you may leave the hall if you wish or can go the back side of the table and take a seat. Kingsley had also similarly summoned 2 sets of tables and chairs. He took a seat on one chair while Tonks sat on the other. He announced similar to Rufus, let us start with Hufflepuff. One by one each of you starting from the front will come here and answer the questions. After that you may leave the hall if you wish or can go the back side of the table and take a seat. While the 3 Aurors were starting to prepare to ask questions to the students, Amelia prepared herself to interrogate the professors. Much to extreme displeasure of Dumbledore, Amelia had taken a seat on the large golden throne at the center of the table. Dumbledore was extremely angry. The throne belonged to him. Only he had the right to sit on it. This chair is too comforting, Headmaster, Dumbledore heard Amelia's sarcastic voice. And it definitely gives a good view of everyone. I wonder, is this chair the reason, you know everything? He did not reply to Amelia's jab and stood silently. Amelia smirked and waved a wand and summoned a wooden chair. The chair was small and definitely less in height than even an average chair. Take a seat, Headmaster, said Amelia casually while giggling inwardly. She eyed the other professors. If the heads of the house wish, they can serve as witness to the questions being asked to their students. At this, Professor Phileas Flitwick and Professor Pomona Sprout moved towards their house when they heard Amelia's voice, but no interference. On the other hand, Dumbledore was seething from the blatant disrespect Amelia showed her. He gazed intensely at the small chair he was asked to sit on. How he wished to take out his wand and show Amelia Bones what actually Dumbledore was. He swallowed hard and calmed his fury. He closed his cold eyes, took a deep breath and replaced it with calm eyes. He knew he had a political battle to fight and his opponent were not the naive Hogwarts students but a shrewd and powerful women. He replaced his stoic and angry face with a smile and moved, I am sorry Madam Bones, but I will have to tweak your magical creation a bit. He took out his wand as he walked ahead, you see, it would be very difficult for my old bones to sit on this small chair. And with a wave from his wand, the small chair was transfigured into a large comfortable chair. Although it was not as big and luxurious to the throne on which Amelia was sitting, but it was close. The wooding were intricately carved and soft cushions covered with expensive velvet was fitted on it. Dumbledore took his seat and his eyes were at the same level of Amelia's eyes and he stared into her eyes with a face full of amusement. Amelia did not react and her facial expression remained neutral. I believe you will cooperate with me in this investigation and answer my questions truthfully, Headmaster Dumbledore, said Amelia. Dumbledore chuckled, naturally, Madam Bones. It is my duty after all. I myself have been gnawed in these past days by all what have happened. I along with Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch have been tirelessly trying to find out the truth about the matter. In fact, I also have had help from your one of best, retired Auror Alastair Moody. Amelia let out a small smile, good to hear about your efforts, Headmaster. Now is the time I put mine. Chapter 84, Amelia takes Dumbledore to Bangers. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The entire Hogwarts had their rapt attention focused on Dumbledore and Amelia. Even the students who were busy in answering the questions of the Aurors had their focus drawn towards the teacher's table. Headmaster, as per my information, began Amelia with a chill in her voice. You announced about the Triwizard Tournament on the first day of this year's session along with most of the tournament's rule but nothing about the method of selection of champions by the Goblet of Fire. Your information is indeed correct, Madam Bones, chimed in Dumbledore trying to interrupt Madam Bones. Amelia continued as if she heard nothing, I want you to answer two of my questions. Firstly, when was it decided that the Goblet of Fire would be used as the method to select the champions? And, secondly, how many people were aware of the fact of the goblet being used? Dumbledore frowned. The Goblet of Fire had always been used as the impartial selector in the previously held Triwizard tournaments. It is a tradition. He added, as for the number of people aware, it is hard to say. Almost the entire higher up at the Ministry must be aware of this. Amelia did not have a change in her expression but her tone hardened. Conducting the tournament every 5 years also had been a tradition but was broken. Restricting students because of age was not a tradition but was added. She pressed forward, let me rephrase so that you do not have to scuttle around. When was it decided that the tradition of using the goblet would continue in this tournament also? Dumbledore sighed, it was in the last week of August that it was finalized to use the goblet as the selector of the champion. And the decision to host the Triwizard Tournament along with the confirmation from the two schools about their participation had been achieved in June only, added Amelia, to which Dumbledore nodded in agreement. She continued, the Goblet of Fire is a powerful and dangerous artifact and since this year a lot of focus have been on safety concerns, there must have been few voices that might have not wanted to use the goblet. Dumbledore's smile stiffened but after a moment he answered, indeed. Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge was not so keen on using the goblet. But you persuaded him on your guarantee, fired Amelia back. Dumbledore clenched his fist in irritation. He knew very well that Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch would have been the source of Amelia's knowledge. Originally he had no problem in playing this game with Amelia but the problem was the presence of the entire school. All this fact coming to light would only serve as a means to tarnish his image but he could do nothing for now. Having no other option, he nodded in agreement. Amelia pressed further, what about the other two schools? Dumbledore felt being cornered in the first question. He now understood that Amelia was not actually trying to find out something but she was merely putting him in mud. With narrowed eyes he answered, the other two schools were also apprehensive. But you again persuaded them, finished Amelia. Again, on your guarantee, she added after a pause. Dumbledore did not react. The Great Hall was in perfect pin-drop silence and watched the entire proceedings with intrigue. Now, the second question, said Amelia. All the rules were framed and the selection method was announced to the students. It was decided that an age line would be drawn to prohibit students below the 17 years of age to put their name in the goblet. Why did you not consider that if someone below 17 years anyhow put their name in the goblet would have no restriction on itself to select students of age only? Why did you not add the age restricting factor in the magically binding contract itself that would have tuned the goblet with the age restriction? This would have been a far suitable and appropriate method to enforce the age rules, pointed Amelia. We did not think this much and decided to continue the magical contracts which had been in use in previous tournaments, said Dumbledore. After all, who would have thought that such an incident would occur? The age line method is such an irresponsible method. Any adult wizard and even few genius students would have easily nullified the age line, began Amelia. When I was in 5th year at Hogwarts, I could have done it, so could have many other students from wizarding families. Books of the family magic of the wizarding families contains numerous such obscure spells, said Amelia, surprising a majority of students, especially Muggle-born and Muggle-raised who were keenly hearing every word being talked. She continued, cutting across whatever explanation Dumbledore had to offer, even a particular genius Muggle-born, a junior of mine, Lily Potter would have found at least 3 or 4 methods to breach the age line. Dumbledore could only grit her teeth in anger. He had no counter to offer. What all was said by Amelia was true. Amelia continued, and now admit that you did not think properly about the tournament and all the safety concerns that was being talked about were hoax? You admit yourself being irresponsible and overlook such simple things? Your only explanation is that you did not think that such an incident would occur. Amelia argued. She was in no mood to stop and continued to take Dumbledore to bangers. After all the efforts the Ministry put in to revive the tournament, you act lazy and irresponsible? For a moment let me assume that Harry Potter himself put his name in the goblet, but it was your job to stop students like him. And you failed at it, marvelously. Because of this incident our country has become a laughingstock among most wizarding worlds. Not only this, the tournament has been put to an end even before it began. Drumstrang and Beauxbatons School have already declared their intention not to participate in future tournaments. All this because you failed to do your part. I believe if one additional name can come out of the goblet, maybe a dozen more may have popped out. Tell me, Headmaster, if because of your blunders something unfortunate would have happened to one of the visiting students who would have been responsible? Do you realize what a diplomatic fallout it would have caused? Boomed Amelia's voice. The entire hall went in numb silence. All the points which had been raised by Amelia no one had thought of. The consequences of what have happened was not something anyone had thought in detail. Chapter 85, Amelia's Rage. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The atmosphere in the Great Hall was clearly very tense. All the facade of calmness Dumbledore was trying to maintain was fading. His traditional grandfatherly smile he always carried on his face had disappeared long ago. The twinkle and amusement in his eyes when he used other people as his puppets was long gone. His expression was of extreme frustration. He had his fist clenched. For first time in years, he felt cornered. He found no suitable and reasonable explanation to all the words that had left Amelia's mouth. It was clear to him and to the entire school that it would not matter if Harry was the one responsible for putting his name in the goblet. His name was going to get dragged through the mud. It was as Madame Bones had explained. He was the one who had fell short of his responsibility. It was under his responsibility that the name of a minor came out of the goblet. On the other hand, Amelia had a calm expression on her face, but inwardly she was smirking and giggling. Dumbledore tried to explain in a low and very guilty voice, "It is indeed as you say, Madame Bones. I definitely failed in the responsibility that I had taken. But even so, I think you should try and focus to find out the person who was perpetrator of this incident," said Dumbledore, trying to shift the focus away from him. He could not avoid the blame, so he could only damage control as most. Feigning guilty, he tried to gain sympathy of the students. He also talked about the perpetrator, trying to shift the focus back on Harry Potter. Amelia did not respond to Dumbledore's explanation as her aim was achieved. She continued, "Now, let us move to the next question." Dumbledore nodded while Amelia said, "Headmaster, you said that the magical contract used in the tournament has not been altered within the same contract that had been used in previous tournaments was used." Dumbledore again nodded in agreement. "Then came this time the goblet gave out 4 names?" asked Madame Bones. "Without alteration in the contract and the goblet, how come 4 names instead of 3 came out?" Dumbledore replied solemnly, "I have a suspicion that the goblet was altered with." "What kind of alteration we are talking?" asked back Amelia. "I am not very sure, but as my dear friend and retired Auror, Alastair Moody also suspects, it seems a confundus charm was cast on the goblet, making it believe that 4 instead of 3 schools were participating in the tournament," replied Dumbledore. "A confundus charm, quite plausible," said Amelia. "You must have searched the goblet of any leftover magic then and recorded its magical signature." Dumbledore shook his head, "No. The goblet was taken back to the Ministry. An incident of such a measure occurs in your school. The person you all accused, Mr. Potter, adamantly denies his involvement and asks you to hold a proper investigation and call for DMLE, whispered Amelia in very low but heavy tone. "You refuse to call for DMLE, saying you have capable people from Ministry and yourself to conduct the investigation." She gazed into Dumbledore's eye and said in same low tone, "And now you tell me that you sent the goblet back to Ministry without searching for any magical signature. Then what the hell were you investigating?" screamed Amelia and smashed her palm on teacher's table in extreme anger. The magic around her fluctuated wildly and a long crack appeared on the strong wooden table while all the students flinched back in fear. Seeing Dumbledore not speaking, Amelia's voice boomed, "Can you tell me, Headmaster? What kind of investigation were you conducting when you did not try to collect any evidence from the goblet, which was our best hope to get any clue? And now, after almost 4 days, no trace of magic would have been left on the goblet. I do not want to say this, but all things have started to point out as if you deliberately allowed all this fiasco to happen by taking half-hearted measures to enforce the age now line and then did not call for the DMLE, which should have been the most logical step even when Harry Potter asked you to do it. And then now it appears as if you again deliberately did not allow the goblet to investigate it and whatever evidence we could have collected from it to go to waste, thundered Amelia in rage. Are you doing all this deliberately, headmaster? Asked Amelia in low but extremely chilly voice. Dumbledore was in extreme rage and only his high achievement in occlumency was preventing him from taking out his wand and killing Amelia then and there. He took deep breaths and calmed himself down. He knew he cannot take even a slightest wrong action, as this would wash away whatever good image and respect he had been left with. He kept quiet, but Amelia said, I am waiting for your response, headmaster. Dumbledore sighed, taking hold of the emotions. Looking back and judging things of past is completely different than being in that situation. When viewing things of past, we have a different perspective. We have the advantage of the knowledge and tend to conclude that this course of action should have been more appropriate. At the time when Harry's name came out of Goblet, things escalated quickly. We had little time to react and definitely we could have had a better response, said Dumbledore. In all that chaos we missed about checking for a magical residue on the goblet. I focused our investigation in a different path, finished Dumbledore. Amelia scoffed at this weak and illogical argument. Oh. Then let us move on to the next question. Please tell us about the different path your investigation took and what result it have yielded. Chapter 86, Dumbledore's Move. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Amelia's question about what kind of investigation he had been conducting in past few days left Dumbledore searching for a response. He had done nothing in the past days. Since, neither Ludo Bagman nor Barty Crouch were too much interested in any kind of investigation, as they had assumed Harry to be the culprit, or rather Dumbledore had played the words well to make them believe Harry as culprit. It had been so easy for him to push this whole matter under the rug and focus on his future ploys and plans. Dumbledore kept silent for a long time, while Amelia kept staring dead into his eyes. He sighed, Madam Bones, the direction in which I took my investigation is that I tried to find out if anything peculiar had happened to the goblet or near the something goblet. For this, I conducted a detailed inquiry through the various portraits in Hogwarts. I also conducted very detailed investigation with the house elves if they have seen something. At this moment, though no one noticed but Hermione's eye widened in shock, which was later replaced by a pained expression. Though tears did not fall from her eyes, but the slight wetness could not be avoided. Meanwhile Dumbledore continued, though I missed about the goblet, I conducted various other investigations searching if any kind of intrusion happened in Hogwarts. And you have not even found a single clue, finished Amelia. She scoffed, Headmaster, these students may be naive enough to believe all what are you saying, but I am very well aware of games, politicians like you play. She continued, you are chief warlock of the Wizengamot. You are very well aware of nuances of a crime and how is anything handled. The way you casually made errors on almost all the crucial points from the age line to investigating the goblet is something only an unaware person would believe. I do not believe you. Amelia was about to continue towards the next question, but Dumbledore sighed deeply, attracting all attention towards him. This was something he had planned from the very start, and now was the right time to play his trump card. You make think of me as some kind of conspirator, Amelia, said Dumbledore. Though his face was not visible to the students as he was facing towards Amelia, everyone noticed the slight quiver in his voice. The pain in his voice was clear to everyone. Even Amelia did not correct him immediately about again using her first name, as she was waiting what game the old coot had further to play. He continued, I admit for my negligence for not using some better methods in drawing the age line, but it was because I thought it would be sufficient to keep some over-enthusiastic students away from the goblet. No one had any idea of something like this happening. Dumbledore's voice deepened and the pain in it more astounding and more clear. As for the investigation, I confess my lackluster approach in it. And no, I did not have such an approach because some mistake, but it was intentional. This brought a sudden gasp and slight chaos in the Great Hall, but it remained in silence waiting for Dumbledore to continue. Harry raised his eyebrows in response. He understood that Dumbledore was up to something. Amelia also understood the same, and her gaze on Dumbledore intensified. Dumbledore continued with the same quiver, I know what I did is wrong. I did so because I was afraid that I would find the person responsible for Harry's name coming out from the goblet with enough evidences. The confusion among the crowd deepened. Wasn't finding the culprit was something the headmaster had to do. Unless he wanted the culprit to remain hidden. Dumbledore got up from his seat and turned to face the crowd of the student. The pain on his face was now clearly visible to every student. Dumbledore focused his eyes towards the Gryffindor table, on a particular student sitting at the other end of the table. I was afraid, I would find you, Harry. It took some moments for the students to register what the headmaster meant by this, but it dawned on them. Dumbledore did not conduct the investigation properly because he wanted to protect Harry. His implication about Harry being the man responsible for him name coming out from the goblet was clear to everyone. Everyone present there conveniently forgot that Harry was the one who had asked for a detailed investigation through DMLE. On the other hand, Dumbledore was back in his game for the first time this night. Though in the beginning, Dumbledore had not been prepared for the Amelia's question regarding his approach to drawing the age line, but he knew very well that there was no way he could hide his lackluster approach in the investigation. And to come out from that situation he had only one method. To admit his intentional approach. But then give a fine reason for it. And what better than using this moment to further solidify the fact as Harry is the culprit. He had done enough. And now if the real person responsible is not found out with concrete evidences, Harry would never be able to wash out the allegation on him. Though a good number of people like Amelia Bones would not believe him, but the general population and people on the side of light who seem him not less than Merlin himself would believe him. Dumbledore had played his card, but he was not done yet. He had one final thing to add which would further enhance his image and his act of selflessness. Chapter 87, Dumbledore's Confession. I was unable to update for the past few days because of an accident I suffered. Back to regular updates. Continue to support me. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. At Dumbledore's announcement, Harry kept his face completely neutral. I don't know what had happened that you have suddenly started to mistrust me, said Dumbledore eyeing towards Harry. The quiver in his voice more prominent as he would cry at any given moment. Dumbledore continued, but know that, though the world may call me biased, I have always considered you my own grandson. Harry sneered at this internally. James and Lily were like son and daughter to me, added Dumbledore. They were the kindest of people with a heart greater than anyone. Their tendency of forgiveness was something that no one could even close to them. Harry's magic started to flare at this moment. Using his parents' name in such a blatant manner was a disrespect to their name. From the day Hagrid met him and introduced him to magic, Harry had been compared with his parents. It was not that he disliked that thing, but he hated that people were not merely comparing him with his parents but were using his parents' name as a tool to guide Harry on the path they wanted. He hated this fact of bringing his parents' name in politics. Unaware of Harry's raging inner turmoil, Dumbledore continued, Harry, my boy, when you were born, it was the happiest day of your parents' life. They wanted you to become a great wizard and an even greater person. He sighed deeply as if lost in nostalgia of pain. The slight wetness in his eyes was now clearly visible to everyone. Then the tragedy struck. They were killed protecting you. They made a tremendous sacrifice to keep you safe. Since everyone was so focused on Dumbledore, they failed to notice the small magical fluctuations happening at two locations in the Great Hall. The first one was none other than Harry, who was raging in anger. The second was at some distance away Kingsley Shacklebolt and Tonks, who were questioning the Hufflepuff students. The person in question was Minerva McGonagall. Her eyes were narrowed dangerously and expression furious. The grip of her hand on her wand tight. One little drop of tear had trickled down Dumbledore's cheek. When I received the news about their loss, I was taken back, but then you came as beacon of hope. You were the last piece of James and Lily Potter. Dumbledore tightened his expression and the quiver in his voice was gone. That time I resolved to keep you safe and sound. His shoulders slumped. I admit what I did. I did that because I was afraid my discovery would mark a blot on the image of James and Lily Potter. I was afraid that I would tarnish the so loving memory of James and Lily. Harry's rage was at the peak at this point, and he was about to subconsciously get up when his eyes caught the face of Amelia Bones. Madame Bones was staring directly into eyes and her expression was completely stoic. Harry got the message and took a deep breath and focused on his occlumency shields and sat down. The Great Hall was in complete silence at this moment and no one knew what to react. Dumbledore stood at his position with slumped shoulders as if he had lost his entire world. After moments Amelia moved. Her rhythmic footsteps echoed in the quiet hall until she also arrived in front of the teacher's table and stood at some distance from Dumbledore. So, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, in presence of me as DMLE head, you just admitted that you intentionally misled the investigation and also allowed for one of the major evidences in form of any magical residue left on the goblet go to waste? Do you admit your crime? Asked Amelia in crisp and clear tone without any hint of emotion. Dumbledore's head jerked to his side and he looked at Amelia in shock as if saying that did not you heard such an emotional story with such an emotional face I addressed just now. Even the students sitting below looked at Amelia as if they were looking at such a heartless woman. The Slytherins who almost hated Dumbledore also looked at him in sympathy. Amelia waited for some seconds but when she did not get any response, she said in louder tone, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, do you admit that you intentionally misled the investigation and also allowed for one of the major evidences in form of any magical residue left on the goblet go to waste? Do you admit your crime? Dumbledore knew that he had no other option as he had already confessed it in front of the entire school. Yes, I admit. He continued, but I deny all the charges Harry had pressed against me for putting his life in danger. Amelia nodded, very well. She announced, since you have admitted about your crimes, I believe I do not need to ask any more questions from you. The students except Mr. Harry Potter will continue to give their statements, she added further. Also, the professors will have not to answer any questions today. She looked sternly towards the professors, at any cost you all have to be present in Wizengamot at the time of hearing. You all may be called in as witnesses. Any absence for any reason will not be tolerated, warned Madame Bones. She crisply walked down the podium of the teacher's table. Mr. Potter, a word in private. She asked Harry as she approached him. He nodded his head and followed behind her to the outside of the Great Hall. Chapter 88, Amelia Suggest a Name. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Amelia Bones and Harry Potter were walking side in the empty Hogwarts corridor. How was it, Lord Potter? Asked Amelia. You managed to dent enough of Dumbledore's image, Madame Bones, said Harry. But he was able to play a life-saving grace in the end. Though he admitted to mislead the investigation, he used it to show himself as some great sacrificing man. You are correct Lord Potter, replied Amelia. But we will one-up him when the time comes. Why did you cut the investigation short, Madame Bones? Asked Harry. I believe you had to raise some other few points. Amelia sighed, after the last card Dumbledore played, if I would have had continued to push him further in the corner, he would have made some other moves to garner more sympathy. Some things must be left for during the council hearing. Harry nodded in understanding as the duo continued to walk in silence. When will you visit Madame Longbottom? Asked Amelia. Tomorrow evening, replied Harry. Do you have anyone in your mind to represent you at the council hearing, Lord Potter? Amelia asked again. Harry raised his eyebrows. I thought you would represent me like the previous time. Amelia shook her head. I can, but it would not be ideal situation. Last time when I had represented you, it was a case of direct attack on you by Severus Snape. As DMLE head it was my duty to deal with a crime, but this time it is a kind of allegation you have filed. It would be better for someone else to take up the job, added Amelia further. Harry nodded in understanding and asked, do you have someone in mind? Amelia smiled, I do have a certain someone in mind if you are willing trust. Harry looked at Madame Bones inquisitively, tell me. After having the small talk with Harry, Amelia returned back to the Great Hall while Harry walked towards a certain location. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. After some minutes of walk, Harry arrived at the 7th floor in the left corridor. After coming in front of a certain tapestry, Harry stood opposite the painting and a moment later a gate appeared in front of it. The gate opened and Harry walked inside. The room appeared as Harry had willed it. It was the size of a small room and at the center of the room was placed a small stool. At the top of small stool was placed a small golden cup, the Ravenclaw's diadem. Harry was going to start collecting the Horcruxes starting today. He said, Dobby. With a pop the enthusiastic house elf appeared inside the room. Harry sir. Dobby, collect this diadem inside a wooden box and place it in my room in the chamber, instructed Harry. Remember not to touch the diadem. Okay, Harry sir, replied Dobby and with a pop he was gone. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. By the time Amelia and her aurors were done with the recording of the statements, which proved to be a futile task as no one had anything suspicious to report, it was already post-noon. Even the remaining classes remained suspended and the students were allowed to return to their dorm. Headmaster Dumbledore was currently in a serious discussion with Severus Snape in his office. "I told you, Headmaster," Snape almost shouted. "The day he tortured those 4 students of my house that he is turned dangerous now. You should not underestimate and neither try to use manipulative method on him. You should have taken that Potter brat seriously." Dumbledore was much calmer. He responded, "Calm down, Severus." He smiled, "Well, who knows, this can turn into an opportunity for us. The game has not even begun properly." Severus snorted, "I tell you, Headmaster, that the Potter brat is planning something dangerous." Dumbledore shook his head, "Leave this to me, Severus." "Any news about the Dark Lord?" inquired Dumbledore, changing the topic as Severus had been repeating the same thing about Harry from a long time. Severus shook his head, "No. But the mark has been darkening, Headmaster. Also, it seems that something is going on between the former Death Eaters. Though I have not been contacted yet, I believe I will soon have a visitor." His tone turned grave, "But I am sure about one thing. He is coming back. Dark Lord is coming back." Dumbledore nodded with a serious tone, "Let him come, Severus. I will vanquish him this time for good." "Severus, contact Lucius," said Dumbledore. "It seems Harry has started to partner with Amelia Bones. That woman is too shrewd. I have a feeling that she will definitely try to prop the Great Alliance," added Dumbledore. "Try to convince Lucius to not oppose me in the hearing. It will benefit Harry. If he cannot support me, he can at least try to be neutral." Severus nodded, "I will try, Headmaster. But without the Blacks, how can the Great Alliance be revamped?" he asked with a confused face. "Sirius is next in line for Black Lordship, Severus," replied Dumbledore. "If he tells Amelia of Sirius being innocent, then she will definitely try to get him free of his charges." He continued with a sigh, "Also, even if there is no Black House, then Potter, Bones and Green Grass itself forms a formidable trio. If they somehow bring Longbottom into it, I will definitely lose my influence in the Wisengamot." Severus nodded, "I understand, Headmaster." Dumbledore was about to something more when he suddenly stopped and looked towards the direction of the door, which after some moments opened with a bang and Minerva McGonagall walked in. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows at the furious expression Professor Minerva was wearing on her face. Chapter 89, Minerva's Warning. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. "Dumbledore, I need to speak with you," said Minerva in very heavy tone. Without waiting for Dumbledore to respond, she turned towards Snape, "Professor Snape, will you please leave us alone?" Snape was taken aback by the venom in her tone and looked towards Dumbledore for a moment, then back towards Minerva. "I don't think my presence here is causing any kind of hindrance." Snape was not even finished when Minerva whipped her wand and 2 spells left her wand. In moments a wooden showpiece on Dumbledore's table was transformed into a small metallic knife and then was levitated, pointing very close to Snape's eye. "I am in no mood for this nonsense," boomed Minerva. "Don't test my patience." Dumbledore glanced towards Snape and gave a subtle nod. The bat grimaced his face in frustration and walked out with quick strides from the headmaster's office. Dumbledore sighed, "What made you so angry, Minerva?" "Take a seat first," he added further. Minerva ignored what Dumbledore spoke and she asked, "What are you trying to achieve?" The old coot frowned, "I don't understand." "You very well do, Dumbledore," Minerva cut across. "I am among those people who have known you for the longest time, Headmaster. All the manipulations you do, the games you play, I am very well aware of it." Her eyes were intense and tone venomous. "For years, I did not say anything because I believed that whatever you were doing was for the greater good. I allowed all that to happen because I did not want to get involved myself in any other thing other than teaching. I believed in you. You ran Hogwarts as if you were running the backyard of your house. You let the quality of education fall below to such a poor level. You allowed Snape's incompetency and discrimination run rampant. That disgusting man full of hatred was never qualified to be a professor. Many students, especially from my house, filed complaints against him and you just placed those in dustbins. I was too blind to see what you were doing." She continued, her voice cutting the air like a knife. "In name of promoting harmony, you fostered hatred between the Gryffindors and Slytherins to such an extent that even after leaving Hogwarts then cannot let the hatred go away from their heart. In name of forgiveness, you allow bullying. You normalized the words and deeds students like Malfoy did to Muggle-born like Hermione. What could have happened to Luna Lovegood was not the first instance when something like that happened in Hogwarts. But you did nothing. You allowed that disgusting man to continue as head of Slytherin who hate every other student from his core. Dumbledore wanted to reply something at this point of time, but Minerva continued, not only this, you kept all the Muggle-born ignorant. To think that even Muggle-born study Muggle studies but nothing like wizard study. What is happening to Penelope Clearwater is not an exception but the normalization. And what you do? Her voice boomed, even scaring the hell out of previous headmasters hearing from their portraits. You sit in your luxurious office. You go to meetings as the leader of light, talk big about kindness and all that stuff and then continue sitting. You knew very well what was going to happen to Penelope but you did nothing. With all the influence you hold you just blabber. Dumbledore was still keeping his face neutral. Minerva, I do not get what all you are talking. I may be a flawed man but what all you are saying is baseless. Minerva sighed in defeated tone, but you are not only one to be blamed. I also had my duties, my responsibilities, and failed it. Her voice chilled, but not now, Dumbledore. I know very well what are you trying to do with Harry Potter. Just because he became independent, you are writing all these plots to bring him under control. I won't say much about all what have you done to him in the past, and I will also not run away from the fact that I also failed in my duties for him. Her eyes narrowed and voice extremely cold, but what you did by using the name of James of Lily just for your political plots is a disgusting thing. I let it happen in front of my eyes but this was the last. Try that one more time and you will see what I can do. She got up, her magic flaring wildly in the room. This is my warning to you, headmaster. Don't play these games anymore. She started walking out of the room but stopped midway. Also, control your pet dog. I hear a single word from his mouth insulting Harry or his father, or I learn of a single instance of him targeting students of my house, or for the matter of fact any other house, then he would do well to remember that I can reduce him into dust in moments. Don't test me this time, she announced and left the headmaster's office. As soon as the gate of his office was closed, Dumbledore screamed at the top of his lungs and with his wands fired few spells in and around the room in anger, almost destroying everything. He is finally gone senile, commented one of the previous headmasters before running away. It took some minutes for Dumbledore to calm down, and with another wave of his every destroyed thing was restored to its previous condition. He started to feel Minerva turning distant from him since the start of the year, but he had never expected her to go against him in such a manner. Minerva going against him was a very big loss for him. She was one of the most respected women in the wizarding world. Even families and witches or wizards who had no respect for him, held Minerva in high regard because, be it her no-nonsense attitude, her strict character or her impartial nature, were widely acknowledged and applauded. Other than this, she was a powerful witch. Dumbledore could think of only two names, Voldemort and himself, Albus Dumbledore, who could go against her in a duel. She was a loss which was hard to recover. Chapter 90, Something Peculiar About Hermione. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The day Amelia Bones had arrived in Hogwarts, Harry, after retrieving the Ravenclaw's diadem, had spent his rest of the day cooped in his chamber studying the so-called dark magic from some of Slytherin's book. Now the next day, Harry, after having his breakfast, was attending the first class of the day, which was Double Transfiguration. Harry was sitting alone at the back of the class. What he found intriguing was few gazes that Minerva had directed in his direction. Harry felt as those gazes were filled with relief, as if some kind of weight had been lifted from Minerva's shoulder. Harry wondered if something had happened the previous day. After the lecture got over, Harry left the corridor and was walking alone in the corridor when a panting Hermione caught him from behind. "Harry! Where were you yesterday after you left the Great Hall?" questioned Hermione with annoyance laced in her voice. Without giving any chance to reply, she asked further, "And you tell me, where have you been staying during the night? Why don't you come back to dorms?" Harry smiled, "Don't worry, I have found a good place to stay." Hermione opened her mouth, but as if understanding what she wanted to say, he added further, "No, I won't tell you where. At least not now, maybe in future." Hermione huffed in fake anger but did not push further. After walking for some time in silence, she asked in grave tone, "Will Madame Bones be able to find the culprit who was responsible for putting your name in the goblet?" Harry stayed silent for some moments and then decided to tell the truth, "Honestly, I feel the chances are too low. There are too many variables and hardly any clue. Unless something very concrete come to light, it is almost impossible." Hermione nodded solemnly. "Why do you think Headmaster was trying to put the blame on you?" she asked with an expression of dejection. At this question, Harry stared at her incredulously. Sensing his prying gaze, she whispered slowly, you yourself repeatedly asked for DMLE to investigate, but even then, Headmaster made up the reason that whatever he was doing to protect you. It should be a common sense that if you really were the culprit, why would you try to force an investigation? And even if Headmaster truly believed what he said, he should have at least first found the truth and then decide what to do with that truth, she added further. Harry shook his head, his motives remain unclear. But one thing is certain, that his aim is to bring me back under his influence. From the first year, he acted as if he was very caring towards me, very kind towards me. But that was all words. He did nothing about the way Snape insulted me and my father. He continued, during the Quidditch match when Quill tried to kill me, no one wondered how come the latest broom Nimbus 2000 suddenly started to malfunction. We were naive children at that time, but not Dumbledore. Using my safety as reason, he first kept me in that animal zoo, then each year forced me to return the same place, but no one wondered if some previous Death Eaters were trying to kill me in Hogwarts. Hermione was silent and looked solemnly while Harry continued, let us not even mention second year. Despite evidence that I was innocent, the whole Hogwarts believed me to be a murderer and Dumbledore did nothing about it. I won't go on, but every year my life had been put in danger, but not even once did Dumbledore lift a finger to do anything. Hermione still had a dim expression on her face and muttered, why would Headmaster do such a thing? Harry halted his steps and after some moments of silence he replied, only he would know what he wants. But I know one thing for certain. That in the past 3 years, by the end of the year, I was face to face against Voldemort. First year against his wraith. Second year against his diary. And in third year against Peter Pettigrew, Voldemort's Death Eater. Though Harry did not say, but he knew that this year also the path led to his confrontation with Voldemort. Hermione did not reply anything back and continued walking slight ahead of Harry. Only she knew what was she thinking. Harry simply followed behind her towards the direction of their next class when he noticed something very peculiar about Hermione. The stairs of Hogwarts, which were famous for making students lose their way, was bending to Hermione's way, though she was not doing it subconsciously. Harry observed her for some minutes and then reached her. Hermione, do you still face problems while using Hogwarts stairs? Hermione widened her eyes as if struck by some realization. Now that you mention it, Harry, I have not lost my way in the past week. It seems that I have finally cracked my way around Hogwarts, she exclaimed in happiness. Harry nodded, sure you seem have. You had told me about some surprise, when I had asked you what you have been doing in the past month. When are you going to tell me? Harry asked further. Hermione seemed to hesitate, to which Harry said, tell when you are ready. Hermione nodded and walked with a smile. What have you been up to in the past month, Hermione? Muttered Harry slowly while deep in his thoughts and walked behind her. Chapter 91, Night Before the Trial. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It was the night before the day of trial in Wizengamot. The atmosphere in the Hogwarts was brimming with various kind of emotions. Some were anxious at what was going to unfold tomorrow, some were excited about the future events amid the anticipated clash between the Harry Potter and Albus Dumbledore. Many others, which mostly included the students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang and had no personal stakes, were simply curious about the drama that was about to happen. One positive thing that came out of this whole fiasco was that it got the Muggle-born students interested in the wizarding world and its systems. They wanted to know about how things worked, how would the case be fought, how does the Wizarding Council function, how does the various departments, mainly DMLE, would get involved and its various functions, etc. Harry, after completing his dinner, was walking in the corridor when he found Professor Minerva standing near one of the turns in the corridor. Harry, understanding that she was probably waiting for him, approached her. Good evening, Professor McGonagall. Good evening, Mr. Potter, she replied with her usual no-nonsense expression and continued, I was wondering that have you made any arrangements for yourself to arrive at the Ministry? Harry, though had no lack of methods to reach the Ministry, simply shook his head. No, Professor. Minerva nodded, I thought so. If you are willing, you can travel with me using the Flow network in my office. Harry agreed, okay Professor. Minerva gave a nod and walked away. Harry also continued his walk, and after arriving at a secluded space opposite the way. November 1994. Unknown location. Harry appeared in a vast expanse of land covered with green grass all around. The weather was starting to turn chilly as Harry felt a cold stream of air splashing across his face. At around 500 meters ahead of him stood a pure white mansion made of marble. The mansion, though not as big as the Peveril Manor, was humongous. It was constructed in mix between the old style and modern architecture. It was the Longbottom Mansion. Though the location of the mansion was unknown to the majority of the world, Harry had read it one of his grandfather's diaries which was about the Great Alliance. Harry started to walk towards the mansion. He was about 200 meters from the outer walls of the mansion when he stopped abruptly. He raised his hands and poked his index finger forward. The finger collided with something and a white light pulsed from it. The light surged and it spread, forming a transparent dome-shaped outline around the mansion. The protective wards of the Longbottom Manor. Harry simply stood there waiting when around after few minutes an elf popped in at the border of the wards just in front of Harry. The elf bowed in greeting, "Harry Potter sirs, Madam Longbottom best not taking any visitor. She would not best meeting anyone. She asked you to leave." Harry stared at the elf for some minutes and then at the manor in distance. He sighed, "Fine." He turned around to leave but stopped midway and muttered, "Tell your Madam Longbottom that if she wishes to meet me after tomorrow, she would need to arrive to me." With this Harry disappeared to complete his second objective of the night. November 1994. Unknown location. Harry with a ripple of air appeared in front of C. Located above him was a steep cliff which was a picnic spot for the children of Wool Orphanage. Tom Riddle had murdered 2 of his companions from the orphanage in the cave. Harry's second objective of the night was to retrieve another of Voldemort's Horcruxes. The Locket of Salazar Slytherin. This piece of Horcrux was the most protected Horcrux laced with various layers of protections. Without any change in expression, Harry walked towards the cliff face and soon entered a fissure in the cliff. Harry waved his fingers, the Elder Wand did its wonders and white bright ball of light hung over his head illuminating a large amount of area. To move ahead, Harry needed to plunge himself into the chilly water but he was in no mood to take a swim today. He noticed a wooden plank lying around the corner and with another wave of his finger the plan was summoned to it. Another spell hit the plank and it then levitated in mid-air just above the water. With steady steps, Harry stood over the plank and with his fingers controlling the plan it sped forwards carrying Harry deep into the tunnel. After some moments, Harry reached a dead end and he stepped on the rocky shore facing the wall. This was the first protection of Voldemort's magic. The location of the Horcrux was behind the wall and it required blood sacrifice to open a passage in the interior of the cave. Harry now having no reason to worry about alerting Voldemort if he decides to check the Horcrux as his clash with him was inevitable would not willingly offer blood for a blood sacrifice. He summoned his Elder Wand and with a glimmer the death stick appeared in his hands. When you are weak, you use tricks but when you are strong, tricks don't work against you. And this blood sacrifice was merely a trick for the weak. Harry waved the death stick and pushed a large amount of magic from his monstrous magical reserves and muttered, "Bombarda Maxima." A light surged from his wand and it collided with the wall in front of him and in no time an explosion occurred. The wall was blasted open with stone and debris flowing all around. A hole was opened in the wall revealing a large blackish lake behind it inside the cave surrounded by rocky shore. Harry stepped inside getting closer to the Horcrux. Chapter 92, Surprising Visitor. November 1994. Unknown location. After stepping inside the cave, Harry walked towards the blackish lake. The lake, as Harry knew from Voldemort's memories, was filled with a breed of creatures called Inferi. These were dark creatures, created by Voldemort from the dead bodies of the people he had murdered. The Horcrux was at a small rocky island in the center of the lake. Harry walked near the shore and gazed towards the center of the lake. The lake seemed endless and other than the reflection of the white sphere of light nothing was visible in the lake. Harry pointed the death stick and muttered, "Oxio boat." A loud clanging metallic sound was produced and moments later a boat tied to an iron chain appeared at the shore. Harry stepped on the boat and the boat magically stirred towards the center of the lake. During the journey, Harry could see the floating bodies of the Inferi which would get into action as soon as they would sense his presence or remove the Horcrux from its position. The use of such a foul magic on dead corpses disgusted Harry to his core. He sighed as a means to control his disgust and frustration. Minutes later, a small rocky island came in his view. The boat reached the shore of the island and Harry stepped down. At the center of the island was a small white pillar made of marble. At the top of the pillar, it was carved into a bowl shaped which was filled with some strange liquid. This was a true piece of Voldemort's master class in magic. The liquid did not allow anything to pass through it or even touch its surface. A liquid which could neither be vanished, transformed, or any charm applied on it. The only way to remove the liquid and reach the Horcrux was to drink it. It was almost certain that the person drinking would be sure to die but not before they would have to live through their worst memories. The only other way to bypass this was to overwhelm the protection set up by pure magical force. And wizards and witches who could overwhelm Voldemort's protection through sheer power could be counted on one finger. himself and Albus Dumbledore. And Harry was certain that if it came to the point that Dumbledore had to retrieve the Horcrux, then he would choose to drink the liquid. Although the old coot had a good chance to survive this thing, it would definitely make his life miserable even for a short period of time. Shaking his head to get out of his inner musing, Harry stepped near the white pillar and pointed his wand towards the liquid. A jet of light left his wand and soon the air above the surface started to get compressed. Soon the air took a shape of small cyclone of the size of a fist, in a shape of drill, and it moved towards the liquid. The liquid forced the drill away from its surface, but Harry continued pouring tremendous amount of magic into his spell. Soon the drill pressed forward, splitting the liquid from its center all the way to the other end. Harry put his other spare hand in the gap and moments retrieved a locket out of the liquid. He stooped his spell and the liquid returned to his normal state. Harry observed the liquid and a frown appeared on his face as the locket was not his original locket. He did not take long enough to guess who was the person responsible for removing the locket, as only other person other than him knew its location. Regulus Black. The point being, where was the locket now? Though he was not sure, he could guess a few locations. Whether in annoyance or in intrigue, Harry applied pressure on the locket and two of its vertical layers split apart, revealing a piece of white paper. Harry unfolded the paper and a smile formed on his face on reading the content of the letter. The content read: To the Dark Lord, I know I will be dead long before you read this, but I want you to know that it was I who discovered your secret. I have stolen the real Horcrux and intend to destroy it as soon as I can. I face death in the hope that when you meet your math, you will be mortal once more. R.A.B. It seemed that a member of the Black family was redeemed before his death. Harry also wondered if Regulus was successful in destroying the Horcrux. Even if he was successful, unless Harry himself sees the destroyed locket, he would continue searching for the locket. He turned back towards the boat and sighed in annoyance at the wasted time. He stepped on the boat when there was a movement inside the lake. Few hands of Inferi tried to catch Harry's feet with the intention of drowning him in the lake. With the intention of permanently destroying these foul creatures, Harry raised his wand and pointed towards the lake. Harry was about to fire a Vafian fire when a hooting sound over his shoulder drew his attention. Harry looked up only to find Hedwig looking towards him. Hedwig, muttered Harry in surprise, to which the owl turned her head as if she was angry at Harry. Harry sighed, I will bring you next time, to which the owl further turned her head away. Harry softened his voice, sorry, please. I did not forget about you. I have just been busy. Hedwig took few moments to respond but ultimately hooted happily, and next moment she flew towards the lake. Her entire body got covered in lighting and in no time the entire lake was bombarded by dozens of lightning bolts blowing the Inferi to smithereens. Hedwig flew back and perched herself on Harry's shoulder. How did you know I was surrounded by these? Asked Harry, though he himself was aware. Hedwig hooted with a proud look in her eyes, and Harry said, you sensed foul magic near me with the connection. You sure are an intelligent bird, added Harry further. Hedwig again hooted, to which Harry sighed, I know you can carry me anywhere even if it is laced with wards. I told you, I did not forget about you. Hedwig gave a loud hoot and the pair of the bird and the wizard disappeared in flash of lightning to complete the remaining two objectives of the night. Chapter 93, Penelope Clearwater. November 1994. Diagon Alley. With another flash of lightning when Harry appeared, he was in an obscure corner in Diagon Alley. Hedwig let out a soft hoot and flew away. As it was getting quite late in night, most of the shops were starting to get closed. The owners of the shops and the workers were on their final tasks. They were cleaning the shop and organizing the things before they would go home. Harry had his face covered with the hood of the cloak of his invisibility cloak. With slow strides he started walking, his destination Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor. The ice cream parlor, like the other shops, was on its closing leg. One of the employees working at the parlor was clearing the floor while three other remaining employees were rearranging the chairs on the table. From the corner of his eyes, Harry caught the sight of the person he was looking for. Dressed in a short skirt of the white waitress uniform, no doubt designed to attract the attention of the customers, the witch had blue eyes and curly blonde hair. The expression on her face though had a little smile, but it was stiff. The color in her eyes had dulled, and Harry no longer saw the pride and fierce determination to be best in everything he had once associated with this girl. She was none other than previous Hogwarts head girl and the topper of the school. Penelope Clearwater. Harry walked near the girl and sat on a chair behind her. The best ice cream you have, Harry placed an order. Penelope turned and replied with a neutral expression, Sir, we have closed for today. Sorry for your inconvenience. Harry did not respond and put his hands in the pocket of his overcoat, pulled out few shining gold galleons and placed it on the table. Penelope's eyebrows widened in shock as she counted no less than 15 gold galleons, which was more than her monthly salary. By the time she could reply, Harry pulled his hood down. The blazing green eyes and the familiar face shocked Penelope even further. Harry had been all over the news since the past week his name came out of the goblet. And seeing him here, in front of her eyes, was a shock to her. She was about to respond, but a slight fat man with small beards crossed her in haste and bowed before Harry. He was the owner of the shop, Florian Fortescue. He said, "Mr. Potter, it is our pleasure to have you here." Most wizards would have considered what was Harry doing in Diagon Alley at this time when he should be in Hogwarts, but Florian Fortescue was a proper businessman. And the amount of gold galleons on the table was more than enough for him to put aside any question he had in his mind. Florian Fortescue continued with a flattering smile, "Mr. Potter, you should not worry. The parlor may be closed, but such rules apply only to ordinary people. And you are no ordinary wizard." He quickly pocketed the gold galleons from the table and turned towards Penelope. "Clearwater, serve Mr. Potter with the best ice cream we have." He then leaned and whispered, "Serve him well. And don't worry, you will get a good share of the tip Mr. Potter have given us." Penelope nodded in daze, failing to understand what was transpiring. Nonetheless, she removed all these thoughts from her mind and walked inside the parlor to get the ice cream. In very few short moments, she walked back with a dazzling glass ice cream bowl. In the bowl, 2 scoops of ice cream had been served for Harry to enjoy. Penelope walked and placed the ice cream on the table in front of Harry and was about to leave when Harry interrupted her. "Miss Clearwater, if you don't mind, can we have a small chat?" Penelope seemed to hesitate, but remembering the gold galleons, she nodded and sat down. Harry picked up the spoon to eat. After few moments of silence, he asked, "How is life going, Miss Clearwater?" Penelope did not answer immediately, but tear welled in her eyes. "Are you also here to mock me, Harry?" Understanding that she had misunderstood his intentions, he shook his head. "No, Miss Clearwater," he continued, "in fact I am here in need of your services." Penelope frowned. "What services?" "Well, you are one of the best students to ever graduate from the history of Hogwarts. And though I do not look down on any kind of job," Harry replied, his gaze moving around the parlor, "this place is not where you can utilize your talent to the fullest." He added further, "I am here to offer you a job." "What job?" asked Penelope with an aggressive tone. Her tone made Harry realize that she had been offered some jobs before. Harry again shook his head. "Don't worry, I am not here to offer a price for your physical body." He continued, "You can think it's some kind of assistant of me. You will have to look after my businesses, deal with a little bit of politics, and most importantly slap some sense into few idiots of the wizarding world. We can talk about details only after you agree." Penelope seemed to hesitate. To Harry, which was completely normal, "If you agree, I can make a magical oath to never force you to do anything and that you would be free to leave whenever you want." "Of course, I will pay you much more than this place pays you," added Harry. Penelope went into silence for some time with hesitation clear on her face. With all that she had went through, to be cautious was a natural trait. She finally nodded, "Okay. I agree." Harry smiled brightly, "Very well. Where do you live?" "In a small flat not far away from here," she replied. Harry nodded, "Good. Dobby." With a pop, the enthusiastic elf appeared and bowed towards Harry, taking Penelope by surprise. "Harry, sir," called for Dobby. "Yes, Dobby," said Harry. He pointed towards the witch. "She is Penelope Clearwater. Take her with you to the manor." He turned towards Penelope. "Make yourself comfortable while you wait for me. We have few things to discuss. I will be back shortly." Dobby took Penelope's hand and popped away, and moments later Harry also disappeared in flash on lightning to complete the next and the final objective of the night. To meet the person who was going to represent him in the Wizengamot tomorrow. Can you guess, who is the person? Chapter 94, Harry arrives in front Wizengamot. November 1994. Chamber of Secrets, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It was finally the day of Wizengamot hearing. Though it had gotten quite late yesterday till he had finished his meeting with his representative and then with Penelope in Peveril Manor, Harry got up early in the morning. He then did not go to the Great Hall for the breakfast. Dobby, being his enthusiastic self, arranged for Harry's breakfast from the Hogwarts kitchen. He dressed himself in very fine aristocratic clothes made of pure acromantula silk and boots of dragon hide. To finish his dressing, a large emerald brooch from Slytherin treasury, matching his eye color, was attached to his outer coat. Getting dressed, Harry vanished from the Chamber of Secrets. November 1994. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Next moment, Harry reappeared in an isolated corridor of Hogwarts close to Minerva's office. He approached the office gate and knocked it twice. "Come in," responded Minerva from the inside. Harry walked inside. Minerva was dressed in her usual attire and was sitting in her chair. Seeing Harry dressed like he was, she was taken aback in slight shock. She murmured, "You appear quite charming, Mr. Potter." Harry smiled in response, "Thank you, Professor." Minerva recovered from her shock and she said with slight frown, "I am still wondering, where do you just disappear, Mr. Potter?" She continued, "I have been in Hogwarts for decades and yet I am still unable to figure out where do you live." Harry let out a chuckle, "When the time will come, you will naturally find out, Professor." Minerva sighed but did not say anything. She stood up and picked up some flow powder, "Just like last time, Mr. Potter." Harry nodded while Minerva threw the powder into the flames and said, "Ministry of Magic." November 1994. Ministry of Magic. With a burst of green flames, Minerva followed by Harry appeared inside the atrium of the Ministry. The entire atrium was in mayhem and it looked like as if the space was filled with press reporters and over-enthusiastic wizards and witches. The moment Harry appeared, they swarmed towards him like vultures. But before they could take more than few steps, Minerva took a step forward and her posture turned bold with her wand in her right hand. "I respect your desires," said Minerva in slow speed but loud enough voice. Her eyes were narrow and she let out a small portion of her magic which created an overwhelming pressure around her. She declared further, "But please don't force me to be rude with you." Witnessing the powerful Hogwarts vice-headmistress and her overwhelming presence made the vultures halt their footsteps and they could only look towards Harry with greedy eyes. Moments later, the crowd parted way to reveal Amelia Bones followed by two Aurors walking towards the duo. "Good morning, Madam McGonagall," greeted Amelia. "Good morning, Mr. Potter." "Good morning, Madam Bones," they replied in unison. Amelia said, "Let us go." Minerva and Harry walked behind her towards the hall where the hearing would take place. Minerva seemed to hesitate but she finally asked, "What is the response about all this in the Ministry, Amelia?" It was clear from Minerva's tone that she was not asking this question to a DMLE head but to her former student. Though Harry and Minerva could not see, Amelia's lips curved up into a mysterious smile. "Well, all this has come as a shock to everyone, Professor. After all, you don't see Dumbledore and two department heads being put on a trial together on a regular basis." Minerva was about to respond but Amelia continued, "But what will happen today would make the previous shock look like a tickle." Minerva frowned, "What do you mean?" Amelia smiled again, "You will see." The trio continued to walk into silence until they reached the two wooden doors. One for the members to walk in for the council meeting while the other one for the audience balcony. "It is time, Mr. Potter," said Amelia staring at the gate to which Harry nodded in response. Minerva sighed letting out a deep breath, "All the best, Amelia. Although I do not wish for Hogwarts' name to be maligned because of Dumbledore, I cannot turn a blind eye anymore." Harry raised his eyebrows at this comment but did not say anything. Minerva continued, "I wish you all the best. Hopefully, your arguments can bring the truth out in the open." Minerva smirked, "I accept your good wishes but I am not the one who would be arguing Harry's case." Minerva looked confused at the response, "Then who?" Amelia smiled, "Keep some patience." She then walked towards the gate leading to hall while Harry followed behind her. Minerva looked even more confused, "Mr. Potter, why are you walking in this direction? Unless you are called in as witness, you can't go in the council hall." She took flustered steps behind Harry while continued speaking, "Don't tell me you yourself would be arguing your case. But you as an underage would not be allowed to argue your case," she contradicted herself in a daze. Amelia chuckled, "Just come, Professor." Harry along with Amelia and Minerva entered the hall. Almost all the seats had been occupied indicating the presence of the most members. Dumbledore as usual was occupying his chair of the Chief Warlock. Sitting not far away from the old coot was the Minister of Magic. Amelia took Minerva by her hands and she walked towards their seats. Meanwhile Dumbledore frowned, "Harry, what are you doing here? It is not somewhere, you can come and go as per your wish." "There are consequences for breaking few rules," said Dumbledore with a finality in his tone. Harry was about to reply but a female voice cut him off. "Well said, Albus Dumbledore, boomed the voice without any respect for the old man. Rhythmic sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. And that is what we are here for. To determine the consequences of the crime you have done, the voice echoed in the hall. Almost the entirety of the council gasped in surprise at the newcomer while Dumbledore's eyes hardened and he clenched his fist. Chapter 95, Harry's Representative. November 1994. Ministry of Magic. Harry turned around to see the reason for the shock in Wizengamot. A black-haired witch with deep black eyes walked in. She had sharp facial features and her entire demeanor screamed aristocratic. Her presence was enormous and was hard to ignore. She continued her crisp walk, unhurriedly and stood next to Harry. She faced Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore, you sure have not changed. Dumbledore gritted his teeth. Andromeda Tonks, what are you doing here? Yes, the woman who had appeared to argue for Harry was none other than the eldest of the infamous Black Sister trio, Andromeda Tonks née Black. Amelia Bones had portrayed a very vivid imagery of Andromeda. According to her, she was the most talented and most cunning of the Black Sisters. Although she had been banished from the Black family, yet the fact that she married a Muggle born against her family wish, especially her parents who were known Muggle haters, was testimony of her temperament. She had gone against the entire Black family to marry a Muggle born, and at such a time when Voldemort was on his rise and pure blood propaganda at its peak. Amelia Bones had further used the following words for her description: born as the eldest Black daughter, she was raised a proper Black. Cunning to her fullest with a mighty grasp of wizarding politics. To Dumbledore's question, Andromeda raised an eyebrow. Albus Dumbledore, why are you treating as if this is not the entire Wizengamot but the backyard of your home? She snickered, I have just entered the council. Definitely, I would have some purpose, and yet you are trying to interrogate me as if I am some hardened criminal. She looked around the council as if lost in some memory. The last I visited the council was maybe around 18 years back as an audience. Those were the time when greater individual used to discuss matters of importance in this hall. She snickered in a mocking tone, and now the standard have fallen so low. Her tone cutting the quietness of the hall. The person who is supposed to be put on a trial is occupying the prestigious chair of Chief Warlock and is questioning the person who had pressed charges. She gazed at Dumbledore with a face of contempt. Tell me, Albus Dumbledore, what medicine of shamelessness did you take to seat on that chair today? Albus frowned but did not speak and merely looked around to gauge the reaction of the people. The other occupants of the room were still in state of shock. Andromeda Tonks née Black was someone who had almost withdrawn herself from the public life. She rarely appeared in public. But now her sudden appearance that too in such a high-profile case have left them in state of shock. Till now, though she had been on constant attack against Dumbledore, they had not been able to figure out her true purpose. Though she had almost faded from the memory, but now her sudden appearance had made everyone recall what a woman she was, especially those who had witnessed her in Hogwarts. She had been the epitome of a proper Slytherin with all the cunning and ambition. Andromeda's crisp steps echoed in the hall as she took few steps to approach further close to seats for the members. Let me tell my purpose of why I am inside the council. I am here to argue on behalf of Harry Potter, boomed her voice in the council, shocking the members even further. They had not expected Andromeda to come here for this reason. Andromeda continued, and as Harry's representative, I propose for Albus Dumbledore to leave that chair of Chief Warlock as he himself is the accused. I propose for Madame Griselda Marchbanks to temporarily take over the position of Chief Warlock till the time the trial is completed. Before anyone could react, Dumbledore interjected, no need for a vote on this. I, myself, was to give my chair. If Madame Marchbanks has no objections, then I would request her to take the chair. An old lady who looked extremely fragile stood up and walked towards the chair which Dumbledore emptied. Though Dumbledore had a smile on his face the entire time, he was seething from inside. Firstly, it was the presence of Andromeda. Dumbledore had prepared himself for Amelia Bones to represent Harry, and though in no way she was any inferior to Andromeda, but her being DMLE had restricted her. She could not openly side with Harry and had to maintain a slight neutral approach, while Andromeda had no such limitation. Also, Dumbledore knew that the eldest Black daughter had zero regards for him. Secondly, was the appointment of Madame Marchbanks as temporary Chief Warlock. Dumbledore knew that he would have to leave his position during this case, but he had prepared for someone of his side as his substitute. Madame Marchbanks, on the other hand, was completely neutral with a powerful reputation. She was just like Minerva McGonagall, a no-nonsense woman with strict demeanor. Madame Marchbanks, who was on the chair of Chief Warlock, looked around and said, though I have taken up this position, I want to ask if anyone has any objection regarding this. No person stood up to object Madame Marchbanks, to which she smiled in response. It feels heavy and pleasant at the same to have such great responsibility on my old bones, she said. I will try my best to maintain the dignity the seat holds. She immediately turned towards Harry. Mr. Potter, do you consent for Mrs. Tonks to act as your representative during this case? Yes, Madame Marchbanks, replied Harry. She was about to open her mouth, but Dumbledore interrupted her. Harry, if you are here for this purpose, then you have made a mistake. You could have given your consent from the audience balcony itself. He turned towards Andromeda with a smile. You should have known better, Mrs. Tonks. Before Andromeda could reply, Madame Marchbanks struck her wooden cane, infused with magic, on the ground, producing a loud boom. Though she was not as magically as powerful as the likes of Dumbledore or Minerva McGonagall or even Amelia, but her presence was not small. Her enraged voice boomed, Albus Dumbledore, remember and etch this in your memory in one time. Now I have taken up this chair, so don't interject in my work. Currently you are just an ordinary member of the council as the seat holder of Dumbledore family. She boomed, next time you try to do my work, I will evict you from the council. Dumbledore felt humiliated and enraged. He felt his temper rising on the way he was insulted and reprimanded publicly, but he could do nothing. He gave a simple nod and walked away towards the well of Hall. Chapter 96, Shocking the Entire Wizengamot. November 1994. Ministry of Magic. Dumbledore walked in crisp steps and arrived in the well and stood next to Amelia. Seeing him not taking the Dumbledore family seat, Madame Marchbanks, whose expression was now back to normal, asked, Albus Dumbledore, are you going to represent yourself in the case? Dumbledore smiled in his trademark grandfatherly smile. Ah! Yes, Madame Marchbanks, I will not only represent myself but also my dear friends Barty Crouch and Ludo Bagman. Madame Marchbanks gazed towards the member's seat where Barty Crouch nodded in agreement, then towards the audience seat where Ludo Bagman gave his nod. Madame Marchbanks nodded, very well. Her gaze then turned towards Harry. Mr. Potter, now what is the reason that you are standing here and not in the audience balcony? It was Andromeda who stepped forward. Ah! Madame Marchbanks, she said in a tone imitating Dumbledore. You see, Harry Potter's presence in the well is beginning of a grand event in the wizarding world. After all, things like this may not even happen in centuries, she added with a chuckle. The members of the council looked towards each other in confusion, trying to find what Andromeda meant. Meanwhile, Harry took out his phoenix wand and raised it towards the sky. I, Harry James Potter, as Lord of my houses, claims my seat in the Wizengamot. Dumbledore had his eyes widened and he wanted to step forward to stop Harry from completing his claim, but Harry was faster. A binding white light covered his body and a deep rumble echoed in the hall. Everyone looked around towards the seating rows. The rows had a very specific seating arrangement, with the first row reserved for the 5 most ancient and most noble families. Of these 5 seats, only 2 of the green grass and bones was occupied at the moment. Potter, Black, and Longbottom remained empty. With the rumble, the 2 seats of Potter family and Black family marked with their crests vanished. Only 3 chairs remained in the front row. Everyone was still shocked to the core when another rumble echoed in the hall. In front of the front row, another seat, or better to say, a throne-like structure much grander than the remaining chairs, emerged from the ground. A pure white marble table emerged in front of the chair. Slowly, one by one, 5 crests starting from Potter, Black, Gryffindor, Slytherin, and Peveril were engraved on the back seat of the chair and the backrest of the chair. The entire Wizengamot was in stunned silence, and even the press reporters seating in the audience gallery forgot to click the pictures. Only 3 people, Andromeda Tonks, Amelia Bones and Sinus Greengrass, had amusement flickering in their eyes, as they had already been through the state of shock. Harry with confident strides walked and occupied his designated chair. It was not another few minutes before anyone could come out of their shock. No. This is impossible. You brat, you must have used some underhand measures to trick us, screamed Lucius Malfoy, standing on his seat in 4th row. All this is fake. You cannot be Black Lord. Black Lordship is mine. Draco will be the Black Lord. Harry sneered but did not reply. There was someone else to do this job. Andromeda laughed mockingly. Oh! My dear brother-in-law! How much you have craved for that seat! Her tone changed in a moment from laughter to chilly. Refrain from what you say, Lucius. You are said to be a shrewd politician, you must the consequences of challenging someone's lordship when the ancient magic of the Wizengamot itself has verified it. Think. But Lucius was in no control of his emotions to hear what Andromeda had to say. He was almost frantic. You brat, How dare you? Harry gave Lucius a mocking smile in return. Lucius, having lost his control, was about to whip his wand when Dumbledore, who was analyzing things quickly in his mind, boomed, "Lord Malfoy, take control of your emotions. Don't do things which you will regret." Along with this, Dumbledore released his tremendous magical power, bringing everyone back from the state of the shock they were in. Lucius also got his nerves back and realized what he was about to do. He took a deep breath, glared at Harry and sat down. Harry clicked his tongue in annoyance at the old coot. Dumbledore did what he did not because he wanted to save Harry from being attacked, but to save Lucius himself. He knew that no matter how a great politician Lucius, he was a mere ordinary wizard. And the moment he would whip his wand inside Wizengamot, which in itself was a very grave crime punishable by death or life imprisonment, he would be killed. Let alone Harry, who himself had the capability to kill Lucius, considering what he had shown in the previous month. Amelia, Andromeda, and Sinus would most probably be also prepared. As far as he could analyze, they had already planned this, and there was no way they would give away such a precious opportunity. Maybe even Minerva, the way she had warned him, would be on her feet to kill Lucius. And right now, with how Harry had shifted the entire political power in his favor, he needed some cooperation, and Lucius would have a good motive to support him. He then looked towards still half-shocked Madame Marchbanks. "Chief Warlock, I suggest we take a small break so that everyone can gain back their concentration and control back on their nerves. After all, this is quite shocking to say the least," he added with a chuckle. Madame Marchbanks nodded. "The council is adjourned for half an hour." And the trial against Dumbledore was adjourned even before it began properly. Chapter 97, New Schemes. November 1994. Ministry of Magic. A hall not far away from the council hall was available for the members of the council to rest. Along the hall, many small cabins were connected with it. These cabins were allocated to different lords of the council based on their status, which served as a personal office for these members. Harry was sitting on a couch in the hall. He could see various members looking at him in trepidation. He could understood their thought. They were torn on about approaching such a powerful new member or avoiding him till all the mess surrounding him was cleared. How was it? Harry heard a voice. He looked up to see Andromeda approaching along with two other witches. "Minerva and Andromeda. Definitely entertaining," replied Harry with a chuckle. Andromeda and Amelia chuckled back in response while Minerva closed the distance even further. "Harry. What is all this?" Harry smiled. "Reality, Professor McGonagall." Minerva's shoulders slumped and she sighed and took a deep breath. She took a seat next to Harry on the same couch. "I don't know what you are trying to achieve, Harry." "No, Lord Potter. But as long as you are on the path of righteousness, truth, and justice, you will have my full support," she added further with a resolute face. Harry beamed with genuine happiness. "Thank you, Professor." In one of the chambers, Lucius Malfoy was sitting slumped on his chair, massing his temple. He sighed, grunted, and growled in frustration. "Dark Lord will be extremely unhappy when he learns this," he muttered under his breath. His eyes steeled at this moment, "but when he dies, Black Lordship will fall back to my son." At this moment a knock on the gate of the chamber interrupted his train of thoughts. "What is it?" he shouted in anger. "Lord Malfoy, Headmaster Dumbledore wants to meet you," his attendant replied in meek voice. Malfoy was extremely surprised and felt strange, but considering all what have happened till now, this was quite normal. "Let him in," instructed Malfoy. Immediately the gate of his chambers opened and in walked Albus Dumbledore with his usual grandfatherly smile on his face. Dumbledore looked quite relaxed and happy for a person who was about to face a trial. He, without waiting for Lucius to ask him to sit, occupied one of the chair opposite Lucius across the table. "Ah! Lord Malfoy, it seems you are not doing very great at the moment," said Dumbledore with a small smile. Lucius frowned, showing an unpleasant expression on his face. "Headmaster Dumbledore, I believe it would be wise and time-saving for both of us if you can directly come to the point." Dumbledore did not take Lucius' harsh words insultingly and his eyes twinkled. "Definitely, Lord Malfoy," said Dumbledore with amusement. "But showing concern about another person is a formality which should not be done away with." Lucius' frown deepened and he was about to retort again, but Dumbledore continued, "But nonetheless, I must say seeing Harry Potter as Lord Black must have come as a shock for you." Dumbledore's face turned serious. "I must admit my negligence about Harry." He sighed deeply. "Even so, I still believe that Harry is not mature enough to be a lord, even less for 5 lordship." These words piqued Lucius' interest. "What are you suggesting, Headmaster Dumbledore?" Dumbledore laughed. "I am not the one to suggest, Lord Malfoy," I merely point directions. And I must do it whether it is you or Harry Potter. While Albus Dumbledore and Lucius Malfoy were having their little talk, Harry Potter was sitting on the couch along with Andromeda. Amelia and Minerva had gone away to greet the other members and thankfully no one else tried to disturb him. At this moment, he caught a fat, toad-like woman dressed from head to toe in pink color walking towards him. He did not need much time to recognize the woman as Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister for Magic. She was the same woman who had insulted Luna Lovegood during Snape's trial and Harry had barely controlled himself. Also previous night, he had learned from Penelope Clearwater that Umbridge, on Lucius's bidding, was the person responsible for her being blacklisted from the Ministry. Dolores using her powers and the added influence of Minister of Magic made it impossible for Penelope to get a decent job. Not only that she was said to be extremely close to Minister, she was one of the 3 persons whom the Minister had nominated in Wisengamot with 1 vote each. She reached near Harry and smiled only to appear even more ugly, Harry Potter. Though her face was smiling, the tone in which his name was said was full of contempt. Andromeda sitting next to Harry raised an eyebrow at this. She chuckled, "You must meet Dolores Umbridge." She ignored Dolores's raging face, "Thankfully you are here. You would serve a good example." "Lord Potter," she said with extra emphasis on Lord. "As I was trying to explain the extent of your powers. For example, if you decide to kill or torture Miss Umbridge just because she did not use the correct honorific part Lord before your name, even then you will come out unscathed. Wizarding world is skewed in such a way that ants like her have little value in front of an elephant or say a dragon like you." Umbridge, who heard this, was filled with 2 emotions. One was extreme anger on being humiliated like this, while the other was complete fear, as what Andromeda said was true. How can someone like her, who had lived her entire life bullying people based on her status, could not understand the difference between her and Harry Potter's status? Andromeda again faced Dolores with an innocent smile, "I hope you don't mind on using you as an example." "You wanted to say something," she added further. "The Minister wants to see you," Dolores could barely mutter before almost running. "You truly are vicious with your words," said Harry, giving a glance towards Andromeda. "I am a black, Lord Potter," she said with smile. "This is something I have learned from my childhood." Harry nodded. "Now what would the Minister want from me?" "Bootlicking," she replied. "Now, you have a huge influence over the chair he is sitting on. Should I come with you?" she asked further. Harry shook his head. "I will deal with him." Chapter 98, Meeting the Minister. November 1994. Ministry of Magic. Harry arrived in front of a door, the nameplate on which read, "Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic." Harry gave a gentle knock and entered the room. The room was extremely simple, with only a table and chair placed in it. After all, it was not the minister's regular office, but only for use during council meetings. "Ah! Harry Potter," the minister stood up with a wide smile on his face. Harry nodded slowly. "Minister." "Please, take a seat," asked the minister. With another nod, Harry took his seat and the minister also sat back in his chair. "How are you, Harry?" asked the minister. Though, Harry frowned internally hearing the minister talking so much informally with him, calling his first name and not even using his lord title, he maintained a stoic expression on his face. "I am fine, Minister," said Harry. The minister smiled wildly, but Harry was not finished yet. He continued with anger visible on his face, "As fine as I can be when 2 of your incompetent department head have put my life in danger." The smile on Cornelius' face vanished and nervousness took over his face. "That, Harry. I believe that Ludo and Lord Crouch were not responsible for this," stammered the minister. Harry scoffed, "I know that they are not responsible. They are incompetent. If they had remained responsible, such incident would have never occurred," added Harry. The minister felt lost for words about what to reply to this. He had called for Harry to discuss various issues. One among them was trying to see if Harry could take his charges against the 2 department head back. But it did not seem possible. Even though, he had to try it. "What did you want to discuss, Minister?" asked Harry with his irritation clear on his face. "Ah! Harry, you see, because of your claims, it has caused a lot of damage to the ministry," said the minister in a sad tone. "I was wondering if you could take those charges back." He added in hurry lest Harry directly deny it, "I promise that I will definitely conduct a full detailed internal investigation into your case. And whoever would be responsible would be thoroughly punished." Harry shook his head, "No, Minister. I was earlier assured of the same thing but nothing came out of it. But since you insist so much, let one day of hearing be completed, Harry gave the carrot to the minister. Maybe we can arrive at some out-of-court of settlement after that. Harry knew that by the end of the day, the ministry would be so much on back foot that Harry would be able to extort anything. Not having any other better option, the minister could only nod in agreement. The minister hesitated but ultimately asked, Harry, why do you have 5 lordship? Harry raised his eyebrows, maybe because, I am the lord of 5 houses. The minister let out a chuckle on the joke that Harry made. Anything more you want to say, minister? Asked Harry. The minister sighed deeply and was back to the skill he knew the best, bootlicking and funning. Harry, he said. You are now no ordinary boy. You may not even have proper idea how much power do these 5 houses hold. You truly are an ingenious figure. To bag out 5 lordship at such an young age. You must have faced a lot of hardship. He continued, Harry, though my hands are tied in certain matter, I will try my best to help you in any way. Even with all your genius, you lack the experience which only comes with age. If you ever face any dilemma or confusion, you can directly consult me. He paused and leaned towards Harry, and hopefully, when the time comes, you would use your votes wisely and we could form a healthy and happy cooperation. Harry, not willing to drag the matter, nodded, I understand, minister. Then, I will take my leave, said Harry and stood up to leave. Good luck, Harry, said the minister with a smiling face. Harry walked away. Not much time was left before the proceedings would begin once again. As soon as Harry stepped out of the room, he came face to face with a certain blonde man. Ah! Lord Malfoy, grinned Harry sarcastically. Lucius clenched his fist and stared at Harry with all the hatred he could. Lord Malfoy, I apologize, now that because of me you cannot parade Draco around as Lord Black. Harry rubbed Lucius one last time before walking away, leaving an angry Malfoy. Malfoy snorted, just wait, you brat. Lucius then walked inside the minister's office definitely to do some last-minute task. After another few minutes the Wizengamot was back to its work. Let us begin the proceedings, declared Madame Marchbanks. Ludo Bagam and Barty Crouch, please come into the well of the house, said Madame Marchbanks, and 3 chairs popped out in the middle of the well. Andromeda, who was silent till now, interrupted, Madame Marchbanks, I on behalf of Lord Harry Potter want to propose a different way of taking this trial forward. Lord Harry Potter wishes that the trial of Albus Dumbledore be conducted separately from Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch. According to him, even if he has pressed the same charges against all 3, their involvement varies significantly, continued Andromeda. He believes only by doing so, we can bring to light many different perspectives of the truth, said Andromeda. Dumbledore was almost instant in his reply, I object, Madame Marchbanks. This method is a futile exercise only meant to waste the time of the council. If there are variations we could account them separately, said Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore, said Madame Marchbanks. I very well agree with this time-wastage theory. Dumbledore's face beamed while Andromeda's mind began to spin faster to Fina an alternate method. But in the previous decades of life, I have participated in countless council meetings and trust me, the council has wasted more time on many useless things, said Maiden Marchbanks. The smile on Dumbledore's face vanished while Madame Marchbanks declared, I accept the proposal made by Lord Harry Potter. Chapter 99, Beginning of the Trial. November 1994. Ministry of Magic. Dumbledore could only grit his teeth in anger as Madame Marchbanks allowed for the trials to be conducted separately. Mrs. Tonks, you can begin your arguments, said Madame Marchbanks. Andromeda nodded, thank you, Madame Marchbanks. Now, before I go into the details of this case, began Andromeda Tonks. I would like to establish some facts which have already been confessed by Dumbledore. She faced Dumbledore, Mr. Dumbledore, you, in front of DMLE head, Amelia Bones, confessed that you intentionally misled the investigation into how Harry's name came out of the goblet and also allowed for one of the major evidences in form of any magical residue left on the goblet go to waste. Dumbledore could only agree. Although the confession he made outside the Wizengamot had no value in the council, but since he had done it publicly, he had no choice but to agree. I did what I did to save. Dumbledore wanted to speak but Andromeda cut him across. Thank you, Mr. Dumbledore, she said. Madame Marchbanks, even before I started the argument, one crime of Albus Dumbledore has been established. She continued, her face widening into a grin. Earlier, I asked for separate trials because before I go into the details of this case the council must learn about few things of the past. Dumbledore instantly interrupted, I object. Things of past has nothing to do with this case. Madame Marchbanks shook her head, I don't see a problem if few things are discussed, Dumbledore. It will only shed more light on the truth and help the Wizengamot make better decision. Thank you Madame Marchbanks, said Andromeda. She continued, let us begin from the day when, he who must not be named was killed. She turned and faced Dumbledore, Mr. Dumbledore, can you tell the council under what circumstances and how did you remove Harry Potter after he who must not be named was vanquished? Most people were in confusion about why would Andromeda talk about something that happened 15 years ago, but under the stern gaze of Madame Marchbanks they kept silent. Only Dumbledore understood where all this was going, but he had no other option but to tell truth. James and Lily had went into hiding at Godric's Hollow under Fidelius's charm, but in that fateful night, I suddenly remembered the location and existence of the Godric's Hollow, said Dumbledore in deep sadness. Which meant only one thing, that the wards had been breached. Andromeda cut him off, and after that you must have immediately apparat at Godric's Hollow to confront he who must not be named, but instead would have found a baby Harry Potter and a vanquished he who must not be named. Andromeda cutting off Dumbledore and adding her question was intentional, as Dumbledore telling the court that he sent Hagrid would not create such an impact, but now after her question, Dumbledore saying that he sent Hagrid would definitely raise alarms. Dumbledore could only grit his teeth, no. I did not go to Godric's Hollow but sent Rubeus Hagrid, he found the baby Harry Potter. The reaction was what Andromeda was expecting. Why would you send Hagrid to a place where it was possible that Dark Lord was still there? Andromeda again cut across, the council should note the point that Rubeus Hagrid is keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts and is not allowed to use a wand. Why did you send Hagrid to Godric's Hollow and not yourself went there? Asked Andromeda staring intensely at Dumbledore. Dumbledore could only remain silent. How could he tell that it was Snape who had already told him that Voldemort was gone, and so he had no qualms in sending Hagrid alone? Him revealing this would only further aggravate things and Snape would be thrown into mud. Ultimately he sighed, I realize my mistake. My emotions at the loss of Lily and James let me make an error in judgment. Andromeda nodded, first error in judgment from Albus Dumbledore. Can you please tell me what happened after this and where was Harry Potter kept? And methods you used to ensure Harry Potter's security? She asked. Andromeda made no mention of the secret keeper or Sirius meeting Hagrid. It was all reserved for later. Dumbledore sighed, even after fall of Voldemort. The entire council bearing a few flinched at the name. The world was in chaos. His Death Eaters were rampaging and Harry's security was the prime thing for me. Fortunately, Lily Potter had in a way from her sacrifice left a certain powerful protection for Harry which could have only been achieved by presence of Harry's blood relatives, and thus I decided to have him placed with his only surviving family, his aunt. Andromeda chuckled softly, quite the narrator you are, Albus Dumbledore. Madame Marchbanks, before I shed light on the story, I would like to call Professor Minerva McGonagall as a witness, said Andromeda. Dumbledore again instantly objected, Madame Marchbanks, I request that Andromeda Tonks be asked to instantly come to the matters of the present case. She is just wasting our time. At this rate, it will take days to complete the arguments. Andromeda Tonks smiled, why so anxious, Albus Dumbledore? Even it takes some time, I believe everyone is eager to hear the life story of Harry Potter. How he lived in a castle rivaling Hogwarts? Riding dragons and slaying acromantulas, or maybe riding acromantulas and slaying dragons. Dumbledore felt his temper rising while Madame Marchbanks announced, Minerva McGonagall, please come as a witness in the well of the hall. Minerva, sitting in her seat, sighed deeply and stepped down into the well. Unlike Andromeda and Dumbledore who were standing, a chair popped in from the ground for her and she took her seat on it. Andromeda faced McGonagall, Professor McGonagall, I believe the day Harry was placed at his aunt's home, you were with Dumbledore the entire time. Minerva nodded in agreement. Please tell us the account of all what had happened that day, said Andromeda. Chapter 100, Harry's Tale. November 1994. Ministry of Magic. It began the night Harry had miraculously survived, began McGonagall. Headmaster Dumbledore came to me late in the night and asked me to keep an eye on a certain house. Harry's aunt house. I immediately did as he asked me and arrived outside the house. In my animagus form as a cat, I was able to properly keep an eye on them. It was in the evening of the following day that Dumbledore joined me. She knew that she was called in as a witness so that she could describe everything, not like Dumbledore who covered the story with patches. She continued in a somber tone, "Initially, I was not in favor of leaving Harry there as I found his aunt and her family to be quite unpleasant, but Headmaster convinced me that it was the best option." Around midnight, Hagrid arrived with little Harry Potter in his arms. Minerva took a pause at the moment and did not know how to say the next few sentences. Nevertheless, after the silence, she stammered in slow tone, "After we placed Harry Potter on his aunt's gate and left." Almost of the entirety of the council gasped while Andromeda questioned, "No spells to protect Harry from cold? Criminals?" Minerva shook her head in negative. Andromeda turned around towards the council. "All this happened between October 31st and November 1st. Even though I am no medical expert, I am sure a little boy above just 1 year would die in freezing cold and night during that part of year. And criminals are not entirely innocent. Since Voldemort was vanquished, it has not been 2 days and Albus Dumbledore have already made 2 life-threatening negligence," she added further. She again faced Minerva. "Professor McGonagall, can you now tell the council about life Harry lived for the next 11 years? How often did you and Dumbledore checked upon Harry? What method did you use to check on Harry's upbringing?" Minerva remained quiet while Dumbledore was getting even more angrier. He was clenching his fist. Andromeda was weaving words so well that every act he did not do would appear more horrendous. If the council had simply learned that they did not checked upon Harry for 11 years, it would have not been a big issue, but with how Andromeda framed the words, it would now look another mistake. "We did not visit him." Minerva ultimately sighed with last words barely leaving her mouth. The council again gasped in shock, but Andromeda did not have a single change in her expression. She snickered, "Albus Dumbledore, to think that the Potter couple had so much trust in you to leave him with you, and you failed so miserably." Amelia Bones stood up. "Sorry for interruption, Madam Marchbanks, but I must correct Mrs. Tonks of her incorrect knowledge. We do not know if James and Lily Potter left Harry in Dumbledore's care, as Theorwell was never read. It had been sealed under the orders of Chief Warlock," said Amelia and sat back down. Andromeda remained expressionless for moments until she laughed loudly. "To think that the sarcastic comment I made about the council turning incompetent is so true. The council truly worked on whims of Albus Dumbledore. To think that he sealed the will of a Lord Apparent James Potter of most ancient and most noble family related to his son, who was another Lord Apparent to most ancient and most noble family. And what did the council do?" Her magic flared. The council watched the circus, themselves acting as clowns, and remained in awe of the game Dumbledore played. The council was in complete silence while few also had their heads lowered in shame. Andromeda faced Dumbledore. "I mean, how many rules have you violated, Albus Dumbledore? Would the council need to prepare a separate itinerary for it? Why did you do that? Did you wanted to siphon money from the Potter accounts?" Meanwhile, Dumbledore had his occlumency shields working in full effect to stop showing any emotions. He was so sure that Harry and by extension Andromeda were already aware of the funds he had taken, even though it was not a lot of money. But now that Andromeda again had pulled her web of words, whenever that fact will come to light, he will appear more horrendous. Andromeda again faced the council. "I am really interested into knowing about how Harry Potter lived for the first 11 years of his life. I believe we can have Lord Potter himself come upon and tell us his few experiences." Madam Marchbanks nodded, and Harry Potter walked down in the well from his throne-like seat. He stood facing the Wizarding Council with a calm expression. During discussion with Andromeda, the previous night, he was not very sure if he should open up this phase of life publicly. It was not as if he would feel humiliated or shameful about it, but was just doubtful about opening up. In the end, on Andromeda's advice, he agreed to reveal it. This was necessary to reveal all the misdeeds of Dumbledore. "In reality, I did not want to discuss all this in the council," said Harry. "But truth is something which should not be kept buried. Though I will not talk in too detail. I will state simple instances and the rest is up to your judgment. I was doing chores like cooking, dishes, gardening in the Dursleys' household since I can remember. I started cooking since when I was able to reach the kitchen cabinet using a stool," said Harry calmly. For the first few moments, silence hung in the council, and then it was complete mayhem. Chaos erupted in the council with everyone speaking or shouting at the same time. Madam Marchbanks struck her magic-infused cane on the ground to bring order back to the council. "Lord Potter," she said. "Please continue, and I hope the council will listen patiently."
Thanks for listening.